Freedom Fluid, when you're looking for a cleaner, lubricant, protectant with a wide temperature range that will protect your firearm in all environments. Guardian Protective Training Institute, your go-to organization for all your firearms and personal protection needs. TacX Pro Gear, the #1 site for the best prices on your hunting, fishing, and personal protection gear. The National Concealed Carry Association exists to serve the Second Amendment community by providing a nationwide network of Second Amendment advocates, offer elite self-defense and concealed carry training from some of the nation's top instructors. In addition, the NCCA provides rock-bottom prices on the best selection of hunting, fishing, and personal protection gear and accessories. Hi, welcome to the National Concealed Carry Association podcast. My name is Dan. I'm the Director of Education and Training for the NCCA. And today our podcast is going to be about firearms instructors. As you know, when you go take a class, we highly suggest that you vet your firearms instructor and you know as much about him as you can so that you can determine if your instructor is really going to provide you with the information that you've paid for. Because that's really, really important. There are millions of instructors out there today teaching classes. Some are very, very well trained and outstanding teachers. And as we all know, there's some that are not so well trained and not that good of teachers. So today we're going to talk about all the aspects about being an instructor, how you should choose an instructor, what gets taught in classes, what you should expect to find in classes. And as part of that today, I have a guest with me, Ray Johnson. Ray is a firearms instructor that travels all over the country teaching both civilians, law enforcement, contractors, and a wide range of people. He has an extensive list of credentials in which he has been trained, and he has a military background with out-of-the-country experience. So we're going to talk to Ray today and talk all about firearms instructors and those types of things. So Ray, welcome to our podcast today. I'm glad you were able to join us.
Thanks, Dan. Pleasure to be here.
We're glad to have you. And we're going to talk a little bit about how we met and how all that goes on. So let's start out with the basics. So, where did you grow up? I mean, obviously you were in the military, you're a firearms guy, you love teaching. How did that start in your childhood or?
Well, my dad was in the Air Force for 22 years, so I kind of grew up in that military background. We were stationed in Okinawa for 5 years. That's most of what I remember about my dad being in the military. He retired in Patrick Air Force Base on the East Coast, and I became a surfer, of course, so in Florida. And that was the natural progression for me. I wasn't sure if I was going to join the military or go to school. I actually knew I wasn't going to go to school, so that was my other choice. They said, well, you're either going to go to school or join the military, but you're not going to just hang out here and do nothing. So I was glad my parents kind of kicked me in the butt that way, and I joined the military. If you hear it from my mom, she says that I joined the military and I didn't tell her. So I just came home one day and said, hey, I joined the Air Force. So that's kind of got me on my military. I joined my first 4 years in the military I was a parachute rigger, which we used to call ourselves. Survival equipment is the MOS for that, and we used to call ourselves glorified seamstresses because that's what we did. So flight suits, life preservers, did all the survival equipment. Then I cross-trained into nuclear, biological, and chemical warfare, and that was where I first became an instructor. In the Air Force.
Awesome. So, obviously you volunteered to join how did you pick the Air Force, just out of curiosity? Was it because of your dad?
Yeah.
Dad
was in the Air Force.
Footsteps?
Yeah, exactly.
That's cool. That's cool. And so in the Air Force, you got into the hazardous material things, and then what happened there? You got deployed or you?
Yeah, I was deployed. I was in the first Gulf War, Desert Storm, Desert Shield. Then I was over there for about a year, right before the war kicked off. Then I stayed over there to help clean up and get rid of. I was stationed in Dhahran, Riyadh, and Bahrain.
Yeah.
Bahrain, we got hit with 2 Scuds during that deployment. nobody, the Patriots, I think
Did their job.
they did their job exactly, and they redirected. I was literally the canary in the coal mine. I was the very first airman to go out and test for chemicals to make sure that he didn't didn't bio us, or chem us. I was the first one on scene where the Scud hit ground zero out in the middle of the sand.
That was a tough job.
Yeah, it was. Being that person, that the first one out, knowing that, okay, if I don't do my job correctly, I'm probably not going to make it. If he did use chemicals on us.
Yeah.
Funny story is when those Patriots went off, if you know anything about that weapon system, they're doing 3 Gs when they hit that Mylar and they come out to head for the rocket that's coming in. And I was on the other side of the base. It's unclassified now. So Shegisa was the military base that we were at. And I was on the other side of that base, which is about 5 miles on the other side of it. And I happened to be, in the head, sitting on a toilet. And it sounded like somebody took a cinder block and just ran it right upside my stall. I jumped out of there. I had my mask on and cleared and sealed before I had my pants up.
Yeah.
And I come out, of course, and everybody's running around crazy. But
training pays off then.
Yeah,
Doing the right thing first.
It becomes instinctive.
Yeah. So we'll be talking a lot about that because that's very important. They always say train like you fight or fight like you train.
That's right.
Either way, and in your particular case, you talk right there, your training was get your mask on first. So you went ahead and did that. So when you were in that role and after that role, you mentioned before that that's kind of where your teaching started because you hadn't been a teacher before then. You were obviously joined the Air Force when you were a relatively young age, so you didn't have any teaching experience before that. So how did that work in teaching there, dude? The Air Force helped you become a teacher, or what was that evolution?
Yeah, once I cross-trained into nuclear bio, we teach the refresher training and the initial training for chem warfare. The survivability factor of when we're in MOP 4, MOP 2, and so forth.
Right.
And so that's when I became an instructor. And, I'm kind of dating myself back when the military, we used Harvard graphics to create our slide presentations. You created it on Harvard graphics on that computer system that we had, the Zenith 100 or whatever you were using. Sent it to audiovisual, they would create the slide presentation for you, and then you'd put them in the carousel.
Right.
And so, I did all that. I was the training NCO in Germany. I was in Germany for 5 years. And that's, when I look back, that's where I realized I enjoyed being in the classroom more than I enjoyed being anywhere else. So the other NCOs, they hated teaching. Mm-hmm. So they would be like, hey, Johnson, can you teach my class? I've got to go do this. Yeah, absolutely. So I ended up being the training NCO and teacher, teaching all of the classes because that's where I enjoyed. And now that I look back, that's where I was like, wow, that's where I kind of picked up that skill set. So.
Yeah. And it's funny you talk about carousels and all that because obviously I come from that day too. I mean, I come from the day when slides actually had to be drawn by somebody. Wow. And then you took a picture of it. And then that picture was put on film, and then you slid it into the little thing, and then you dropped it in the carousel. Wow. And so...
Yeah, you're like 20 years older than me, I think. So,
well, thanks for that, but yeah. But that's probably true. But in general... those were the days when you really had to do everything for teaching.
That's right.
I mean, now today's with PowerPoint, oh my God, life is so easy.
Oh, yeah.
Just slide a picture in, do whatever you want. Yeah. But those were the days when you were teaching, you had to develop every slide, in detail very early on. And it wasn't easy to change them. It wasn't like, well, I'll just go on the computer and change this thing.
That's right.
So those were the hard days of teaching. So how many classes do you think you taught back in those days? Was that a lot of teaching? I mean, obviously you were the go-to teacher for them.
Yeah. When I started teaching there, I was responsible for about 5,200 personnel, military and civilians. So, of course, the new recruits coming in to the base, they had to go through if they were new, they had to to do the initial class, which
Yeah.
was 8 hours long. Then the refresher was like 4 hours long. So you had all your veterans coming through. And I probably taught a class a week easily.
Yeah.
Sometimes more depending on the squadron. Sometimes I would go to a specific squadron and do the refresher there, and we set that up special.
So in that teaching, though, you got your experience. You had to develop your own slides. You had to put everything together. Did you do your own agendas too, or did the Air Force provide you with kind of a set agenda that you had?
Well, you have you know, as in the military we have our manuals that
Right.
this is the information that we provide. This is what we have to teach, and the guys loved that shop in Rhein-Main, Germany, was where I first created the slide presentation. They loved it because they didn't have a slide presentation before that. They were teaching straight from the manual. I was like, why don't we make some slides? And these will be our triggers to teaching this information.
So just out of curiosity, what year was that? Roughly what year was that?
Oh gosh,
I mean,
let's see, the Gulf War,
1991?
91, so 91 and a half, 92.
Okay.
Once I came, 92 when I came back, I went back over to Germany. Because I was in Mountain Home, Idaho when I deployed to Desert Storm.
gotcha.
It was 20, I remember it. It was 20 below in Mountain Home, Idaho. Of course, we land in Saudi Arabia and it's 120.
Right. And dry.
And dry,
like
yeah.
being in an oven.
When they open that, the C-130 door, it hits you and you're just like,
Yeah.
culture shock, weather shock, everything. But it doesn't take you long to acclimate there. You don't have a choice. It's just hot.
So now you got out of the Air Force. You spent how many years in the Air Force? 12 years, you said?
About 9.5 active
9.5.
duty, and then a couple of years after that, about 12 years
12
total.
years total?
Yeah,
That's a long time. Thank you for your service. That's
yeah, I
awesome.
appreciate that. Thank you for yours.
So bottom line, so then you got out of the Air Force, and where did you transition there? What was your back into the real civilian life again?
Yeah, that was rough. When I got out in '95, again, I was full-time reserves for a little bit of that time, and then I went, weekend warrior type stuff. And I tell the story like this. I spent about 10 and a half years looking for a job like the military. And it's just not in the civilian world.
Doesn't happen.
And yeah, it doesn't happen. So, 10 years later, that's when I kind of started getting that thought pattern of, I need to do something on my own. I need to create my own business or do something on my own. And that's when the first certification I ever got was the basic pistol, NRA basic pistol instructor certification.
Gotcha.
Yeah. And that's where it kind of, everything just culminated from that. So
when you got out, we had 10 years where you were kind of everybody tries to figure out life again and how do you get back into that world, and then you decided that teaching firearms was an avenue you wanted to go for. So did you take any other classes?
that was my very first class. So I just started teaching that to civilians. They wanted their concealed weapons permit.
Did you teach the full?
By the book.
By the book
NRA,
with their slides.
Everything, by word for word, precept by precept. I mean, it was, and then I started, I was in where I was. That's about all I was really doing. But I was also working for a trash company. I was driving full time for a roll-off division of a trash company, and the NRA basic pistol stuff I was just doing on the side. I didn't even really know that I wanted to get into that.
So, obviously you were in the military and you were in the Air Force, and this is one of the things to think about, was how much weapons training, how much weapons interaction did you have in the military? I mean, did that give you a solid knowledge and foundation base that you said, I can be an instructor in this? I mean, you'd already been a teacher, so we know you had been taught how to be a teacher, and you had obviously trained yourself to be a teacher. But what happened? Where did that weapons interface come?
Yeah, when I was in the Air Force, of course, you only get the basic, M16 training for survival equipment. When I cross-trained into nuclear, biological, and chemical warfare, our peace, you have wartime, you do wartime job, and then you have your peacetime. So I did a lot of major accident response. We did mass casualty response. That was the NBC role in the non-wartime environment. So I qualified on M16, AR-15, the 38 caliber revolver, the M9, the 45. I got to qualify with those disciplines, and I fired expert every single one of those.
Yeah.
But again, hindsight, you're thinking hindsight, wow, I did really, really good with that. And then I guess it just kind of translated into when I became an NRA.
So that was kind of like a passion that you felt like you teaching and weapons?
I really didn't realize it until later on.
Later on.
Yeah. I didn't realize how much I enjoyed it, and especially once I started getting a little bit higher qualifications like the NRA, personal protection in the home, outside the home, became an RSO, a range safety officer.
Right.
That's when I started like that itch, just like, man, I want to do more.
Yeah.
I want more. I want more. I want more.
Yeah, and when I took the NRA class, I mean, I don't know what your experience was. One of the things, because I had been a teacher for a long time before my NRA class and done a lot of the same things, I was like, they don't really teach you how to teach.
That's right.
That's right. There's nothing in the NRA class that I remember that taught you how to teach. It taught you how to go through the slides. It taught you what to say. It taught you how to do a couple things.
But not how to speak.
But not how to get up and speak. I think everybody in our class had to give like a 10-minute talk, and that was it. And if you could get through that 10 minutes...
I can't even remember what they call it. There's a 3-letter word. It's like a prerequisite to becoming an NRA instructor. And I can't even remember the acronym, but it's a very short version of this is the slide presentation and this is how you present them. Yeah. And that's it. And you're done.
Yeah, because I know a lot of people, and we can talk about that in a few minutes, that took the NRA instructor class with no teaching experience at all.
That's right.
Had no education experience. Yeah. They went and took, some of them didn't even own a gun. This was many, many years ago when that first gun craze went on.
Sure.
I know people that went out, they bought their first gun they'd ever owned in their life. They took an NRA pistol class, and then they said, well, you know what? I want to start teaching people.
Yeah.
And then they went, like literally within months, and took an NRA instructor class, and they were advertising themselves as NRA instructors.
That's right.
And I'm thinking, oh my God, the people that take their class, And so... that was one of the downfalls of the NRA instructor classes. Even though it's really good, and I like what it does, and it's got great mission to do, teach people how to teach people, it doesn't really teach people how to teach.
Right.
So it teaches people how to teach people, but it doesn't teach instructors how to teach. And there's no ongoing vetting process.
Right.
Like once you become an R instructor, nobody comes and monitors you to see if you're really teaching the correct thing or you're teaching a good class.
Right.
And so that's, kind of one of the downfalls of that particular program, even though it has great intentions and does a good job. Did you take any other courses? I mean, obviously there's like the U.S. Concealed Carry class course, instructor's course. There's professional courses where you can go, and private organizations, teach you how to be instructors. And then obviously you were in the military, so they taught you there on that different platform that you were teaching. But did you take any other classes as instructor level?
Well, yeah, when I started, once I had that NRA basic pistol under my belt, then I, of course, took personal protection in the home. And any course, look, for me, if I'm going to learn something, I want to learn what the instructor needs to know, whether I'm going to teach it or not. And so I did take the personal protection in the home from a NRA counselor, Dennis Dole. I want to mention his name. Phenomenal instructor, teacher. We still stay in touch, and this was years and years and years ago when I took his courses. And once I started getting that bug of instruction, I try not to take basic courses. I mean, I still take. I'm a concealed carry instructor also, and I do still take those basic level courses because you don't know what you don't know until somebody teaches it to you. And you learn from other instructors on, even if it's just how they worded something. Oh wow, I like how that guy says that.
Yeah.
And then boom, now I can become a better instructor.
Right.
So I take the instructor level courses. I took a course like my TCCC instructor level course. I don't teach anything medical other than your basic tourniquets, stuff like that. But I have that instructor certification because I have no business teaching medical. I'm not a medical. I don't have the medical background to give you the examples and the experiences that you get from being in that background.
Yeah.
So,
and I think you brought up a point that's really important for instructors if you want to be a teacher. A teacher never stops learning from other teachers.
yeah,
And that's so important. And that's when you are become a very good instructor, is when you understand the importance of learning from other instructors and taking that and assimilating it into what you teach or using it in what you practice.
absolutely.
I have to say, I've talked to NRA instructors and I go, have you ever taken another class? Have you ever learned from anybody else? And the answer a lot of times is no. I'm an NRA instructor.
Yeah.
And I'm like, well,
The pinnacle.
that's not enough, And I'm like you, I like learning all the time. How did we meet? We met because I came from one state to another. I need to get my armed licensure, and you happened to be my instructor of that class. And, that was one of those things that you talk about. Here it was, I'm thinking, oh my God, I got to go take a basic firearms class. And a lot of my colleagues and friends were saying, you're going to take a basic firearms class? And I go, I have to for this certification. I got to check this box. And they were going, how are you going to, is that going to be tough? Because it's, what was it, 2 days or 3 days?
3 days, 28
3
hours.
days.
Yeah.
I'm thinking 3 days of basic firearms stuff. This is going to be brutal.
What can I possibly learn here?
He was like, I just got to stay awake. I got to stay awake.
Yeah.
And, you came into the class and, when you first walked in, like anybody does, you're looking at the instructor, you're kind of evaluating the instructor.
Profiling.
Yeah, profiling as that's one of your expertises. And you're kind of getting a feel for that, and you're getting a feel for the class. Like in the class I was with you, I think there were 6 guys in the class.
Yeah. Yeah, it was a fairly small
And
class,
they all
that one.
seemed to know each other, and
Yeah.
I didn't know anybody.
Yeah.
So I was the lone wolf in the class. Nobody knew me, and I didn't know anybody. So that even put me in a more kind of like, check. Do I need to check everything out here?
Sure.
And then you started teaching, and in all honesty, you started teaching, and throughout the class that I took with you in the whole 3 days, it was an outstanding class, and that's how we met. That's how we got to this point right now. Is I felt like you were probably the best, or at least the top 2 best firearms instructors that I had ever attended classes. And I've attended a lot of classes where I've been taught by people and I've had to watch instructors teach. And so what goes to show you is what you just said. Learning from other people and bringing that together and putting that into a class. As an instructor, you never stop learning yourself. And that's what makes you a good teacher. And doing it. People that have never done it, to me, aren't good instructors. It's hard to teach something you've never done yourself. And so that's the part. So when you took all these classes and you have a long list of certifications, which is really cool, those are all learning different things that you're able to apply. So when you started teaching these NRA classes and you had to fall back on, developing your own class and doing your own thing, and now you're teaching private security classes and all the other classes you teach, pepper spray. How was that process? You had to get a comfort level of standing up in front of a group of people that aren't getting paid to be there to listen to you. Now it's people that are paying to come and listen to you. That's a whole different group of types of people. How did that transition go?
Well, first off, I appreciate the accolades and the compliment coming from you. And I'm kind of an accolade guy. All I need to be is thanked, and we're pressing forward. I don't need gifts and money and all that. Money helps, but but I really appreciate the compliment. And that's what I think. To be you have to ask yourself as an instructor, what is my ultimate goal? Am I here for the money? Am I here for prestige, or am I here to share information and experience to other people so that they can become better?
Yeah.
And that's where I think the passion comes in as an instructor. And every course that I've taken, that is my goal. What can I learn from this course that I can share with other people and my students so that when they leave my classroom, they are a better person, more educated, and they've learned from my mistakes that I've made throughout the years. Because as an instructor, we know we learn more from our mistakes than we do from our successes. So as an instructor, you have to ask yourself that question. Why am I doing this?
Yeah.
And that's the bottom line. And if it's for any other reason than to make better students so that they can go out there, defend themselves, defend their families, and become a better person. I'm not going to say it's for the wrong reasons because everybody has their own reasons. But my reason is I just want to make better people.
And you brought up some super valid points. Why do you want to be an instructor? Yeah. That has got to be the first question. Do you want to be an instructor because you think it's cool? Well, that's the wrong reason.
Yeah.
Do you want to be an instructor for the money? That's the wrong reason. I mean, you may make some good money doing it, and I hope you do make good money. I don't mean you, but I mean instructors in general. But the wrong reason is for the money. The right reason is because you want to provide education to people. Many, many, many years ago, I was part of an organization, and they taught these classes. And their mission in teaching the classes was they had a percentage, or they had a high expectation of how many people can we fail. Our mission was more or less to try to fail people, not teach people. And I went to the national meeting, and they were having a whole conversation about, the failure rate and making sure people know this stuff. We got to make sure, they were all talking about failure. And my colleague and I at the time were like, wait a minute, that's not the objective. We thought the objective was to teach people. We want them to walk out of the room with more knowledge than what they came into the room with. We want them to walk out of the room being more comfortable with these skills that they're trying to learn than when they walked in the room. We're not there to intimidate them. We're not there to make them think we're cool. I mean, that's not the part of teaching. Teaching is to pass on some knowledge and information so when these people walk out of here, they're more confident. They feel better about themselves. They have a better understanding of whatever that topic might be. Yeah. And so you bring up a tremendously valid point with instructors. And that's, again, why I have always recommended, and we talked about in those 2 articles that are in the blog articles, you really need to vet your instructor. Yeah. I mean, what was the background of your instructor before you took the class? I encourage people to look up their instructor, go in and ask about them. Where did they get their training? Who did they get their training from? How many courses have they taught? Who taught them? Because that's also very important. I mean, if you're not taught by the right person, then all of a sudden you're teaching the wrong thing. And unfortunately, students are at a disadvantage in most cases. If I went to any class and the teacher was bad and taught me all the wrong things, but it was a topic that I knew nothing about, I might say that was the greatest teacher in the world.
Yeah.
But I learned all the wrong stuff. And that's what seems to happen a lot, particularly in firearms training. I'm sure it happens in other industries as well. But in the firearms training, since that's our passion for you and I see that a lot where instructors are up there teaching stuff, and I'm like, oh my God, I can't believe you said that. I can't believe you told them to do that, or I can't believe you did that in front of your class. And that is why these people, particularly since you're learning to deal with a deadly weapon, something that can seriously injure you or kill you if you don't manipulate it correctly.
Do it wrong,
or somebody else, because you're going to be at a range and doing all those types of things.
That idea right there is what catapulted me into teaching for the different executive protection schools that I teach for, and getting into the churches and teaching them. And once I got that firearms certification under my belt, I thought to myself, when I moved from where I was, and I moved about maybe 60 minutes away, into a major city, I asked myself, well, what does the security industry require of their officers to know about firearms? And so in order for me to do that, in order for you to get your G license, you have to get your D, your unarmed license, because the G is a companion license and so on and so forth. So I went to a school, got those courses under my belt, got those certifications under my belt, and that's when I started, I want to do more than just armed security. I actually fell into that industry just wanting to know what the state required. And that's when I got hired by an executive protection school and started doing security for them. And to back up that point of knowing who you're learning from, I took the level 1 executive protection from a school, but I was working for another executive protection agency. So I was doing EP for them. I got my certification from another school. Well, the agency that I was working for kept hounding me. How come you haven't taken our course? How come you haven't taken our course? The owner of the company kept hounding me. And I'm like, fine. Now, I remind you, I've already taken a course from another company. And I'll get to that. So I said, fine, I'll take your course. I got it. So I arrived the first day and I'm like, okay, basic, good. Got to the second day, I almost walked out of the school. And the little voice inside me said, no, sit your butt down and just finish it. Because what they were teaching me, and I started questioning everything then.
Yeah.
But I am glad that in hindsight that I had taken the course from the first school, because now I had a baseline. Had I not done that, I would have thought that they were teaching me the right way.
Yeah.
And they were not.
And that happens a lot.
That's right.
I mean, because people don't know. I mean, I went and I heard an instructor a while back. I came to listen to this particular person teach a class. And I was horrified. I mean, when I left the class, I called a couple of my friends and said, oh my God, you can't believe what I just heard,
Yeah.
This is crazy, this is scary. And unfortunately, the people that were taking that class had no idea how scary the stuff they were doing and learning, you know? And so that's so important. And so that's why, when we talk about it and talk about being an instructor, certifications are one thing. Experience is the other. Yeah. Because if you don't have an experience, you can have all the certifications to teach in the world, because sometimes there's not a lot of qualifications to be an instructor. Yeah. Like you can get you can get your basic, and then you can get your instructor in a variety of organizations with very little vetting. Yeah. But then the experience is what really makes you a good teacher. And whether that experience is teaching experience, so you learn how to be a good teacher and stand in front of people and do a presentation and develop nice slides and have an organized format, and you have the experience to answer questions. Yeah. One of my kind of red flags with an instructor, particularly in the firearms industry, is when somebody asks a class and the instructor says, well, you should just do what's best for you. I mean, that tells me they don't know the answer. Yeah. Okay? Because if somebody asks you a question, you can give them options. Well, here's option number 1 that you could do. That's right. Here's option number 2 you could think about. Option number 3 that you think about. Now, naturally, you have to find the one that fits you. But then you gave them the options. You educated them about what their choices are. Yeah. But if the answer right off the bat is, well, you just need to do what's best for you, well, then you obviously couldn't answer the question. Yeah, and that's, when I'm teaching a class, my go-to phrase is, what I'm about to teach you are ways. Right. It's not the only way, it's a way. And I'm going to, hopefully by the end of this course, I will show you several different ways that you can apply to yourself, because I can hand you my gun and it's not going to shoot the same in your hand that it shoots in my hand. And so but you're right. And my go-to is when an instructor, I'm sitting in that class and you're shooting low left. So what I need you to do is aim high right and you're going to hit the bullseye. And I'm like, okay, all right. I could do that. I've heard that from I could do that. That is a way to adjust, but not the right way. Not the right way. Yeah. But unfortunately, there's
there's a lot of, we're going to say substandard instructors.
Right.
I'm not going to say bad instructors because they just don't know. They're
Yeah, and sometimes, just like students, instructors don't know what they don't know.
right.
You know,
Absolutely.
students don't know what they don't know. That used to be my famous statement when I taught medical stuff back in the days, is you don't know what you don't know at this point.
That's
and
right.
the same thing goes with instructors. And you want an instructor that knows it, you know,
Yeah,
and, you
sure.
know, there's all kinds of instructors. You know, I worked with some of the people that were outstanding in their profession. I mean, these
Yeah.
guys were the best in the world, but they couldn't teach a class at all.
Correct.
You would never want to
Yeah.
listen to them. In fact, one of my favorite people in my life, you know, I love reading that person's material.
Yeah.
But when they talk, I can't listen to them for 5 minutes.
Right.
They're just
Right.
boring.
Yeah.
And so there's a lot of dynamics to being an instructor. It's not just having the knowledge. It's having the knowledge and having the ability to be a teacher
Yeah.
and to present the material in an easy to understand format and all
Yeah.
of those things as well. So with that in mind, you know, when you're looking at instructors and people that are in vetting instructors, you know, and you're looking at all their certifications are really important in who you learn from because that gives you depth and fundamentals of the knowledge of the subject. But what about other things? What do you think about, like, one of the things I say for people, when you're looking at an instructor, it would be really good, you know, and you should look and see an extra credential as any kind of medical training. Because if you're going to be out in the range with an instructor and something bad should happen,
Yeah.
you want an instructor that knows what to do, you know, and, you know, we all hope to God nothing ever happens in any classes, but sometimes it does happen. And you want an instructor that maybe has some medical background. They know at standard or advanced first aid, whatever those things are. They know the stop the bleed thing. They have some medical equipment on site ready to take care of
Yeah.
something. Should anything happen, from a laceration to a cut to a slide cut or anything. What are your
dehydration.
thoughts on that?
Yeah, I agree. Ultimate responsibility, safety is the ultimate responsibility of the instructor.
Yeah.
Bottom line, whether it be, you know, extra holes in your body or dehydration, electrolytes. And I taught a G course, and this was probably last summer, I think. It was extremely hot. And I always bring a big cooler of water, and we were, you know, everybody was hydrating. There was plenty of water. Everybody was sweating. We were, you know, going to it. It wasn't till that evening when some of the veteran guys, the military guys, they went out to eat, and one of their buddies dehydrated himself that whole day. And it was my fault for not having Gatorade, electrolytes. So basically what we were doing was we were flushing our system out of the electrolytes. And that was, I blame myself for that. I'm responsible for that. So being prepared, having all the equipment that you need, making sure that everybody leaves that range or leaves that training class the same way they came,
Right.
other than having more knowledge and experience. So yeah, I believe it's the instructor's responsibility to check those boxes and make sure that they have all the equipment that they need, make sure that they're prepared. I know for me, even though I've taught this class many, many times, I still arrive there at least an hour, hour and a half early to make sure the range is clear, make sure my targets are set up. I go through a couple of dry fire techniques with me, maybe some live fire, just things that I'm going to be teaching them just to make sure that everything is the way that
Without
it
a
needs to
doubt.
be.
Without a doubt. And for all my classes, one of the prerequisites is you need to bring drinks and snacks.
Yeah,
Because I don't know
absolutely.
what your nutritional
Yeah.
needs are, or whether you might have some medical condition. So I'm not bringing stuff to supply to you. I'll have it there in case of emergency.
Sure.
But in general, you need to bring Gatorade or water or tea or whatever
Yeah.
you like, and you need to bring whatever snack fits your needs for that you like to eat. Because these classes, particularly where we teach here, can be exceedingly hot.
Sure.
And to get dehydrated can happen very fast, when it's 100 degrees and the humidity's 100%.
Yeah, you and I, we went
Right.
through that class. You're 30, 35, 45 minutes from the nearest gas station to
Right.
get anything to eat. They have snacks up at the office, but if you need something for your particular diet plan, yeah.
So you got to have that with you.
Absolutely.
So I tell everybody, bring a cooler, bring ice, bring whatever drinks you like, and believe me, during the class, if you need to get a drink or you need to get a bite of something, just step out and I'll slow down the class, you know?
Yeah.
So I always tell people, if you need to go to the bathroom, you need to go get a drink, you need to stand up for a second, do it, because I want you to be comfortable. If you're uncomfortable, you're not going to learn.
Right.
And so be comfortable. And if I need to slow down the class for a minute while you go to the bathroom or get a drink, then I can do that easy. That's easy stuff.
Yeah.
So I'm like you. I think instructors should have multiple certifications. I think they should have good teaching experience. Somebody needs to teach them how to teach. And I was very blessed. I mean, in my very young age, you know, when I first started teaching, I had a professor who was one of the best speakers I'd ever known and best teachers. The guy was just phenomenal. And he took me under his wing and taught me how to teach.
Awesome.
And, you know, part of the parts of teaching for me is you got to teach, just learn how to talk and be normal.
Yeah.
You can't read slides. Everybody out in the classroom can read a slide.
Yeah.
You know, and those are some of the things that make classes really boring is when you're just reading a slide and not talking about the slide.
Knowing your material.
Knowing your material. Having a fund of knowledge of the material so that you're comfortable to have that conversation is just incredible value. And that's what makes a good teacher, you know, versus a bad teacher. So let's talk a little bit for our audience, because they're probably going to want to know this. Some of these people may have not taken classes. You know, let's talk about basic, intermediate, advanced, tactical, defensive. And we'll start out with kind of like handgun classes. So, you know, you hear basic classes, and I've watched some classes where, you know, you teach a pretty in-depth knowledge of handguns, which is the way I think it should be. If you're coming to a basic class, you should get basic information, but you should get a lot of information.
Sure.
You know, I don't believe in dumbing down classes. And so what are your thoughts? I mean, let's just kind of give a brief overview of what your thoughts are on what would be a basic class, what would be an intermediate class, and what might be your advanced tactical or defensive kind of class.
Well, my basic class starts, of course, with your basic fundamental pistol shooting, whether it's a long gun or you're using pistols. Like my G class, I have a lot of, and I call it teaching the twos. If you're teaching the eights, you're going to lose everybody that is not an eight.
Right.
So I teach the twos. That way, I'm not just teaching the twos, but I'm teaching everybody else too, because I might say something that triggers them and that light bulb goes off and goes, oh, I never thought of doing it that way. So I keep my basic, but I also throw in a lot of just, oh, you can also do it this way, but you need to try this and see if this works for you. When I teach if you noticed, even in my G class and my basic firearms pistol class, I'm not a lawyer. Now, I can teach the law, but I bring a lawyer in. Because why not learn from the person that's in that field teaching you the law of that state, wherever you're teaching, wherever you're learning. So I bring a lawyer in. I can teach. I'm certified to interpret law because of my licensure here in this state, but I bring a lawyer in. Right. That lawyer...
But in a basic class, you know, so basic class, to me, you teach the fundamentals of shooting.
Right.
Stance, grip, sight alignment, sight picture, trigger control, follow through, you know?
Yeah.
And those are the fundamentals of a basic. But also in a basic, you know, people should understand some other aspects. So you should understand how to rack a slide. That's know how to correctly rack a slide.
Clearance drills.
Right. You should know how to drop a magazine and put a magazine in. You should know how to load a magazine.
That's right.
Put a load and get that. Because loading a magazine can be some of the hardest things for a lot of people.
Sure.
I mean, that's a task that seems simple, but is really pretty hard.
Yeah. Putting the rounds in correctly.
And knowing which direction.
Absolutely. Well, and that's why I added in my basic pistol course, both of them, whether it's the G course, the Armed Security Officer, or my basic pistol course, I also implemented, we all know through experience, 80% of our precision and accuracy comes from dry firing at home. 80% of what we need to know about shooting comes from dry firing at home. The rest is recoil management. That's it. You go to the range for recoil management. But I need to train myself to perform the fundamentals without any distractions more than if I just go to the range and I'm just shooting.
Right. And so, but you got to have the fundamentals and learn to practice the fundamentals to be good.
Absolutely.
And so to me, learning how to rack the slide safely, safely in a range. We can rack slides all different ways. I can rack it like this. I can rack it on my belt. Right. I can rack it on my shoe. Yeah. But the reality, in a range, I need to rack it so I'm pointing down range. So people need to be taught that. Yeah. Loading a magazine, like I said, I think that's probably one of the most challenging things for people to do. Putting a magazine in, and learning how to drop the magazine. Yeah. Not necessarily true malfunction drills, but simple malfunction drills. So like, what do you do when you have a stovepipe? What do you do if you have a failure to eject? Yeah. What do you do if you have a misfire? Well, you drop the magazine, you turn the gun. This isn't combat stuff. You do tap, rack, bang. Sure. This is drop the magazine, turn the gun over, rack the slide. Right. You got to learn how to lock. Now, the hardest part for me in the classes I've taught that I think students have the absolute hardest time, and I teach it in my basic classes, but I think it's one of the hardest things, is how to lock a slide back. I mean, that is a challenge that you hope they learn, but in malfunction drills, because you want them to do that. But I tell them, at least if you can pull it back and you don't have a mag in there, so you can't reload it, but you can pull it back and see that there's not a round in the chamber, then that's a start. But eventually you want to learn how to lock it back and make sure your gun's safe. So those are some of the tactics that I think are all part of a basic class. Sure. And I also teach bullet, a little bit of functionality. How does the gun work? How does a revolver work? How does a semi-automatic work? Right. And so I show them I call it bullet or dynamics, where when it fires, this is what happens.
Yeah. I have the little video in my course that I showed you.
And I actually use that exact same video.
Yeah. It's surprising. It's great.
Well, I know. When I saw it, I went, I use that exact same one. Because that's what people need to know. Yeah. Because if you understand functionality a little bit, not a lot, you don't have to be a pro at it, but you understand it, it gives you a better idea about how to manipulate your gun and what's going to happen when you fire it,
What's that basic question, what makes the gun do what it's doing?
Right.
And that brings us to ammunition.
And it helps people understand the difference, because they hear so much bad stuff in the media about automatic weapons and automatic this and assault rifles and blah, blah, blah. Yeah. To get all that terminology cleared up and get all of that done so that they understand it, they really walk out with a lot more, in their bag when they get to go home. And
I get that same, and I'm sure you get the same. A lot of the inexperienced shooters that come to our class never touched a gun before. They're like, I learned so much, and that's that light bulb, and that's that grin that's on their face. I really enjoyed this. That's the satisfaction of doing what we're doing in educating the uneducated, but now they are educated.
Right. So now if you went to like an intermediate kind of class, what do you think about when you think of a little bit more intermediate or advanced type of class? So if somebody out there listening to us says, well, I've taken a basic class, what's my next step? I want to do something more, because when you go to a range, obviously they don't let you draw from your holster in most ranges. They're not going to let you rapid fire, so you can't practice. Yeah. You might be able to get away with double taps for a while, to practice that tactic, but you're not going to get away with shooting 4 or 5 rounds straight. Sure. They're not going to let you do any of those things. So, what do you do in your intermediate or advanced classes and then how do you help these people practice those skills?
So that brings us back to vetting the range. Also, not just vetting your instructor, but where's that instructor, he or she is going to teach you. So I vet my ranges, so they allow me to do certain things because I'm an RSO there. They allow me to do certain things. So now I can teach that intermediate course, moving and shooting possibly, or shooting behind a barricade, cover concealment, so drawing from the holster.
Right. So in that sense, if you were going to teach an intermediate or kind of the next step above a basic class, so, like for me, I teach drawing from the holster as one of the classes, defensive shooting, drawing from the holster and shooting. Now, I have a range that says if this person comes in on these selected days and shows us a certificate from your class, we will let them draw from the holster. But it's a very limited time and everything for them to do that. So there's a place for them to go practice.
Yeah.
At the other range where I teach at, that option isn't available.
Yeah.
So I'm looking at putting together like a monthly program where I'm going to say you can come here and we're going to spend 3 hours at the range and you're going to have the opportunity to practice skills that you learned.
Yeah.
So you can do that. But for me, an intermediate class, there's two different pathways to take. One is just to learn how to do more manipulation of your gun.
Right.
You know, where you're learning how to do double taps just as a practice, not because that's some cool tactical
Sure.
thing, but that's a good way to learn how to do follow-up shooting.
Right.
Then you learn how to shoot multiple targets. So you learn how to focus on different target acquisitions and different angles. And you learn a little bit of moving and shooting, kind of like an intermediate thing. And then my defensive class that's where you learn to draw from concealment. And in this state, because it's a concealed carry state, we just focus on drawing from concealment.
Yeah.
Some people, and I've watched other people teach an intermediate class where it's all drawing from open carry holsters, which is one way to learn, and there's nothing wrong with that. But if you're trying to do something for personal protection, you need to learn how to draw from how you're going to be carrying your weapon.
Sure.
So I draw from concealment and then do the same thing. You know, how to shoot and with follow through, how to shoot multiple targets, how to move and shoot a little bit. And then in my advanced classes, that's where we get to really moving and shooting, determining cover versus concealment, shooting around either one of those kind of obstacles. And that's more of advanced kind of, if you want to call it tactical kind of shooting. So how about yours and the way you teach those, and what are your thoughts on those types of classes?
Yeah, mine is set up similar to that. You know, I'll teach from, like, especially with the females, depending on the type of gun they're carrying, they may have to shoot from their purse. But depending on the type of firearm that they're carrying in the person, that might not be feasible. So they're going to have to draw it, or do they carry it on their person? I always recommend, of course, it being on the person versus in a bag somewhere. Because where are you going to set that bag? Where is your backpack at? Where did you put your purse? Is it even, you know, can you access that defensive tool in 3 seconds or less and be effective with it?
Right.
So yeah, intermediate, and it's all progressive training, and we have the same policy at the outdoor ranges. They have to be vetted with an RSO that they can draw from the holster safely, and then they will mark their card that they're allowed to do that.
Yeah. And that's the hardest part.
Yeah.
When you do teach these next level or next step classes, is where do these people get to go to practice those skills?
Right.
And that becomes the limiting factor, you know?
Yeah.
And to me, that's a disadvantage. And I understand the liability and understand that's why I'm trying to set up something where people can come and do this once a month or do something, because otherwise they don't have a chance to do it.
Sure.
And in some ranges, you know, if they know you and they, like you said, and you've met some boxes, then they'll let you draw from your holster or do things. But it's pretty far and few between, because they just can't take the chance.
Now, and I just want to add, my philosophy with drawing from the holster, drawing from concealment, most of that type of training can be trained at home, dry fire. You don't need that recoil management, but it helps when you can put it all together and go to a range and put everything that you've been doing. My idea, for every live round you put down range, you should have practiced that dry fire hundreds of times at home already. Drawing with different shirts on, with different jackets, drawing from concealment, drawing from your holster, all of that stuff. Anything not involving discharging a round can be practiced at home.
Yeah, and keeping in mind, since you mentioned that, and I think that's a very important thing too, is anytime you're practicing at home, double or triple check that your firearm is safe. You know, one of the number one causes of accidents is people not knowing their condition of their firearm. And so anytime that you're going to use your firearm or your handgun at home and practice, you want to make sure you drop the magazine first, clear the chamber, make sure the chamber is cleared physically and visually, and then make sure that you do not put a loaded magazine back into your gun if you're going to have one in there. Now, when you're practicing dry firing, in many, many cases, it's actually better, unless you need that extension, to not have your magazine in the gun, because that way then you can manipulate the slide better. Because it's always going to go into slide lock if you have a magazine in there. So just some things to consider. Always, always safety first. That's the number one thing when you're practicing at home, and make sure that you do that.
And I just want to add one thing to that, Dan. Designate a specific area in your house for your dry fire.
There you go.
Unless you're room clearing and you have that training behind you and you're doing some exercise in your home, designate one area in your home, and that's only for dry firing. You don't allow any live ammo in there. You don't allow any loaded magazines in that area. And you go there, and that's all you're doing is dry firing right there.
Yeah.
And
that's
then,
great advice. Great advice. So let's talk a little bit about you, a little bit, and thinking about you. You're a trainer, you're an instructor, and you do a fantastic job in those areas. And all those things. So, you can be specific if you want, or non-specific, however you want. But what do you carry every day? What is your way that you carry?
I have two different firearms that I carry. My EDC go-to guns is a 357 M&P 357 revolver, 5-shot. Depending on and I use that for deep concealment. If I've got a little bit tighter shirt on, I appendix carry. And I've gone through all the different 4 o'clock, 3 o'clock, this and that. And I just like carrying appendix. My tactical belly hasn't got in the way just yet. It's getting there, but I can still appendix carry. And if I'm doing deep carry, I use the revolver. But my go-to EDC is my Glock 43 with an extra mag in it, and I appendix carry it.
So
also.
you do carry an extra mag too?
Yeah, it's attached to my holster. Yeah, it's part of my holster. Yeah.
So you like your Glock 43, and so
yeah, I like it. Yeah, it's nice and small. Personal preference, Ford, Chevy. That's how it,
Yeah, and it's like anything, I mean, some guns are harder to shoot than others. Some guns are better. And when you buy a firearm, to me, and these are things that you should learn in a basic class if you've come without a gun. And one of the things that I've found out in my class, unfortunately, I've had people come to my class, like you said, never owned a gun before, bought their first gun, have never touched it when they came to class, get to class, and find out they can't grip it. The grip's too big, or the grip's too small, or the gun's too heavy, or whatever it might be. This wasn't the right gun for them. So some salesperson didn't do a good job selling a person the great gun, and now this person's got this, $400 to $600 or $700 device that is useless to them.
Yeah.
And that's the terrible part. So what gun you carry has to be a gun that you have tried and it checked out and made sure you can grip it correctly. You can access the trigger and all of those types of things. Because if you can't do that when you're drawing from concealment or drawing from your holster, it's 1,000 times harder then. Because if you can't grip the gun correctly, or you over grip it, or you under grip it, or any of those types of things.
Plus the different environment, the environment and that's why I have two different disciplines or guns that I carry. Like, I'm going to carry different if I'm going to a movie theater. I'm going to carry that revolver, and it's probably going to be on my ankle right there, because what's the first thing we do in a theater? Boom, where everybody's ducking. Now I have access to my firearm right here.
Right.
And I'm going to have to stand up or lean back, exposing myself to get that appendix carry out. So different environments. I learned the hard way about an ankle holster. It's funny, I was on a job, and the job required us. I was profiling not profiling, but I was pretexting as part of their security team, and I didn't have I was like, man, I don't have. It was business casual, so I didn't have a jacket on, and my shirt was tucked in. I can't appendix carry that way, so I ended up having to carry a Springfield XDS on my ankle for a week. And that was when the light bulb went off. I need to carry a different gun down there. And I told my dad that story, and he's like, well, here, I have a detective special. It's a 38 revolver, and I carried that on my ankle until I got my, hammerless M&P 357. So I kind of learned that through experience.
Yeah, I mean, I'm one of the people. I'm a minimalist, so I don't carry extra magazine. I mean, I carry a gun that has 16 rounds in it. So if it gets to be that bad, I've used up 16 rounds. I'm hoping help will be there by then, or something.
Yeah,
because it's a really bad situation.
Sure.
So I'm a minimalist. I mean, a flashlight I think is important, but I never go without my cell phone because I think that's the number one of the top 4 survival tools you should always have with you.
Absolutely.
But I don't carry any extra things, and I just carry my gun. And I'm a believer that I carry the same gun no matter where.
Yeah.
Because I'm a believer that the gun that's in your bedstand, the gun that's in your car, the gun that's on your hip, the gun that's in your wherever should always be the same gun, because you should never second guess.
Sure.
If I have to go to my firearm for some bad event, I don't want to have to worry about, well, do I have this one or do I have that one? Do I have one in the chamber? Do I not have one in the chamber?
Yeah.
How's it going to feel when I shoot it? Am I confident or am I nervous? You want to rule all of those things out.
Absolutely.
So you want to be 100% comfortable with whatever personal protection firearm tool you have, that there's unquestionable. If you need it, there's no question about it.
The biggest one that I try to untrain people with is sometimes I carry a 1911, sometimes I carry a striker-fired pistol. Yeah, pick one. Pick one of those, because they're different.
Right.
A lot different. Yeah.
And you don't want to have that second or 2 or 3 seconds that you're trying to figure out your gun in a bad situation could mean that you then become the loser.
That's right.
And you've lost.
Half second.
Yeah, you're lost. It's done. And that's why I'm all about the same gun. People would always say, well, this is my car gun or this is my house gun.
Yeah.
I go, let me just tell you, that may be what you like and that may work for you, but that's not what I would recommend.
Right.
I recommend that same gun. I mean, and I carry at 430. I'm a smaller kind of guy.
Okay.
I carry at 430.
Yeah.
I carry everywhere I can, every day. And I carry a little bit larger gun. I carry the SIG 320. So that's my go-to gun. And, but again, like you said, depending on a variety of reasons, mostly grip, you should determine what the right gun was you.
Yeah.
So anything else that you can think about? Did we miss anything in talking about instructors? I mean, we talked about it's important why you became an instructor and who your instructor is. You want to pick a person who's teaching because they want to educate you, not for some other reason, whatever that may be, but education should be the primary thing. You obviously want somebody that not only has credentials, but has experience, Real world experience goes a long ways when you're teaching anything. I don't care if you're teaching surgery or carpentry or whatever it might be. If you have experience, you're going to be a better teacher in doing it. And then thirdly, vet your instructor, so you should check them out and see who they are and make sure you know who that person is, because you're going to be spending a lot of money to go learn something from somebody. You want to get the best value for your buck, that you did that. And then the fourth thing that we talked about is, pick the right level of class for you, I mean, most places you could never take an intermediate class without showing you've taken a basic class.
Right.
But when you take a basic class, to me, and you can share your experiences, you don't want a dumbed down class. You want to learn as much as you can. And you may get a little overwhelmed. But let me tell you, if you're a little overwhelmed, you still learned a lot more than if it was a dumbed down class,
Yeah, I always I preface I start out with the statement of, first, as a student, expect excellence from your instructor.
Right.
Expect the best. You paid good money. And that money that you're spending is actually an investment in yourself.
Right.
As the student, would you just go throw away $200, $300, $600 and just throw it in the trash and go to whoever? No, you wouldn't.
No.
So expect excellence from your instructor. And as an instructor, we should do a self-check before we go teach a class. Prepare 24 hours before and put yourself as the instructor, I have to put myself in the right mindset to be able to teach effectively.
Yeah.
I shouldn't have any distractions. I should come in there and be happy and ready to teach.
Without a doubt.
And you can, most students can, as instructors, both of us, that's what we're, does this guy or girl really enjoy what they're doing?
Yeah, and you can tell that when people are teaching
absolutely.
right away.
Absolutely.
And then, obviously, you want people that have good certifications from reputable places and experience to go along with that, because that's what's going to make them a good instructor. And then, I'm not in favor, and I'm sure you're not, but I'm not going to put words in your mouth. I don't believe in going to classes where you take a class and then you go somewhere else to shoot. Not somewhere else and moving in location, but like I see a lot of classes in this particular area where you take the class and then you have to go find a range that lets you shoot and to qualify for that part of the class. So you should take a class where it's all in one. You're doing everything in one place with the same instructor doing the same thing. And that's one of the other things I try to tell people, just came to mind to me. When family members take, I go, all the same family members should go to the same instructor.
Absolutely.
In general.
Yeah.
Because you don't want to go out to practice at the range and go, well, my instructor said, instructor said.
Well, back when I...
Yeah. You need to go to the same instructor, try to learn the best from the best guy or girl, and then do that. So if you have any questions about how to choose an instructor, you can go to our blog and check that out. Nationally, you can go to the National Concealed Carry Association website. There's a lot of products on there that you might find, such as range bags, ammo, and guns. There's a lot of good things for you to look at on our sites, and it's going to get better very soon. One of the things I want to end up with is ask you a couple questions, just for some personal things, or not personal, but kind of something I'm going to ask everybody. So in your life, real quickly, like who was the most inspirational person in your life? Did you meet somebody that, that was inspirational to you?
And I know it's very cliche, but my father, he taught me just so much. And it mainly came from my dad and how he presented himself. Uh-huh. He retired from the military after 22 years, and how he treated my mom, how he treated us, and this was my stepdad. I knew him since I was 5, so he was my father, and just how he presented himself in life, and from the military aspect, professionally, and at his home, at our home. It just really inspired me, and the confidence that he gave me to become whatever I wanted to become.
Yeah.
My trust goes, of course, with God, and then I learned a lot from my father.
That's awesome.
Yeah.
What was the best book you've read? If you could tell me, is there a book in your life?
Another cliche. I've read a lot of books from Gavin de Becker, of course, Sun Tzu, The Art of War. Yeah. But probably one of the, Mark Devine wrote a book called Unbeatable Mind.
Yep.
And that probably hit home as far as how to mentally prepare for just about anything. And that was a great book.
I got to tell you, so I'll share with you, you didn't know this before we had this, but that's also one of my life mentors that I read. I mean, to me, one of his books that I read was The Way of the Seal.
Yeah.
I mean, just an incredible book that has so much valuable information in it. So he's been very good at that. So anything in your life, what was something in your life that you felt like might have happened to you that changed or made the life change for you, that for the better?
Well, I became I became more of a very calm person. I had my widowmaker was at 48 years old. So when I went to the doctor, I actually had my heart attack in the ER.
Oh, wow.
Because I recognized the warning signs, drove myself to the ER.
At 48?
At 48.
Holy cow.
Yeah. I was actually... I didn't actually drive myself, but we drove to the ER. My wife was driving. I was actually keeping her calm while we were going to the ER, and I'm having a heart attack. And when I got to the ER, I actually had my heart attack on the table. And I'm like, okay, well, what do we do? Oh, doctor's already been called. From start to finish, when I landed on the table, the doctor looked down at me, goes, well, I just saved you. Have a good weekend. Boom, just saved your life. Have a good weekend. 15 minutes.
Very cool.
One stent, and I'm still here. So that changed my I asked the doctor, well, what's going on? No high blood pressure. Everything was fine. I was a very fit person. Stress.
Yeah.
Caused it.
Stress is a bad thing.
Yeah. That was probably the turning point for me to not let the worldly issues get to you.
Yeah.
And
it's hard to do.
It's
the
extremely
world
hard
is
to do.
a crazy place.
It's
so
extremely
hard
hard to do, especially in this day and age. And that was probably the turning point for me mentally, allowing things to just, roll off my back. And then, of course, about 8 months ago, I do a lot of cycling, and I hit a tree head on, paralyzed from the neck down for about 25 minutes.
Oh, wow.
And that woke me up to making decisions more accurately.
Yeah.
So,
not hit a tree.
Not hit a tree.
Look out for trees.
Yeah, look out for trees.
So Ray, thank you for being here with us today. We're very grateful.
It's a pleasure.
Very enlightening and entertaining conversation. So if somebody wanted to get a hold of you, I know you do a lot of teaching around the state and around the country. If somebody wanted to contact you, because tell me real quickly a couple of the classes that you teach. What would those be? I know you do firearms, but I know you do other things.
Yeah,
as well,
I teach
too.
a lot of different secondary defensive weapons, edge weapons, taser, baton handcuffing. I work for I'm an ASP trainer, armament systems and procedures. I teach pepper spray, your basic self-defense type stuff.
Oh.
I have, my company is 77 Alpha.
Okay.
I have a LinkedIn page. My name's Ray, you can find me at Ray Johnson on
Okay.
LinkedIn, Facebook, 77 Alpha, Better, Faster, First. And, my number and information's on there.
On there. So you can go to LinkedIn and get a hold of Ray there if you're interested in any of those classes. And we hope that'll all help you out. So again, take care, and we'll see you next time.